Welcome to The Inquisitive Artist. I'm Lindsay Tyson, and I'm diving into the lives of artists and art world insiders. How do they create? Can they make a living from the work? And what really goes on behind the scenes? Join me for part 2 with Hester Berry as we continue our conversation. I wanted to ask you about your portrait and landscape painting. You've actually answered some of it, and I was looking at your portrait. It's absolutely incredible. So do people ask you for commissions, or do you actually still paint portraits because you want to, and who would you paint, and how does that work?
Occasionally, I think I occasionally get commissions for portraits, and it can be, I think they're a good challenge. So I like to, I mean, commissions are tricky because you're constrained then, but I think well, I like the limitations sometimes because the challenges are good for you. So portraits normally come into that. Occasionally, yeah, I will paint a portrait because I just feel like it's a good thing to do. Good for me. It's a good
Make a
discipline, I
change.
think, portraits. Yeah, a change, and quite often self-portraits because I am a free model for myself. And also it's sort of, there's something kind of self-reflective about painting yourself. And especially if it's sort of, I'm not worried about, I mean, I don't, you can be self-conscious about photos of yourself and things like that. But if I'm painting myself, I can be as cruel as I want. And so I feel like I can be honest and have, you know, wrinkles and blemishes and things just for the, I guess partly because I can be really, I'm trying to be really objective. So I can be like harshly truthful when I'm looking at myself. And that's quite a perverse enjoyment, I guess.
And would you look in a mirror and do it, or would you do it from a
Yeah.
photo? Yeah, you
Yeah,
look
I
in.
do. I mean, have we done it from a photo? I think well, I've done a couple of lessons on portraits, and I will have done that from a photo, just because it wouldn't work practically otherwise.
Yeah.
But yeah, doing it from a mirror is good, and I think doing it from a mirror, you've got it tends to be okay. Obviously, you're moving to look at the portrait and then look at the mirror, but when you're looking in the mirror, you tend to be still, so it's okay. It works. What I've found is that I quite often have the angle I'm normally doing it at somehow means that I'm looking, what am I doing? I'm looking down, or there's a certain angle that I tend to have my head if I'm doing that.
Right.
And as I glance back, I think it's like mirror up here. So I'm kind of, I'm, I'm, I'm like looking up in a really angry, evil way. So all of my portraits tend to look, and also I'm concentrating, I'm looking intensely.
Yeah.
So all of that comes together to make all of my portraits look particularly ferocious and angry. And whenever I do them, I always have people going, "Oh, you're not that angry. Or you're not that mean looking. You're very, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
I
fun."
once had I used to be the secretary of the Art Society many years ago in Scarborough, and there's an artist called Andrew Cheetham, and I would be the model, and he would draw me in charcoal, and he did this profile of me totally sideways, and I have
Hmm.
quite a big nose, but I'd never realised just how big it was till he drew it, and it was an amazing drawing, but it was so harsh. Yeah, it was really
Well,
harsh.
I have the same, but it's very difficult to do a full on. Luckily, it's very
Yeah.
difficult to do a self-portrait of yourself properly from the
Yeah, I
side.
just never knew how big my nose was and how pointed it was.
Well,
There
I'm
was no
sure he
holds
exaggerated.
barred.
I find that it's very easy to exaggerate things in paintings so that you get the characteristic.
Yeah, yeah, there was no sort of softening of it at all, but it was very,
I
very,
don't think there should be. I think that's awful in a portrait, though.
yeah,
You're kind of, if you're agreeing to be a model, you're fair game for whatever the artist um does by accident, because we're all human, or stylistically. And
yeah,
so when in my portrait classes, I will, I mean, models tend to just be okay with that. People don't tend to get offended if they're, real models.
yeah,
Um, and I don't think you should ever, filters and things are for photos and selfies.
yeah,
With painting, you kind of owe it to painting to be honest and
yeah.
no frills, and yeah.
Yeah. So if you were painting somebody for a commission or just somebody else, would you always do it from life?
No, I tend to actually do it from a photo because I like
Right.
working in my shoot. I mean, I have done them from life, and actually that's lovely. There's something really nice about that because you get like they're imperfect. I will always try and get a likeness, but there's something imperfect and a bit quick about them. And I've done the ones that I really think about that that I still see are my ones of my parents. So when you're doing someone you know or love, you have to, or whoever you're drawing or painting, you have to forget that you know or love them, forget anything you know about them, forget they're even a person, and that helps you get a likeness better. So I'm kind of doing that, but at the same time they're moving. So my mum is knitting or something, and my dad is doing something with a soldering iron with a cigar next to him. So, and he's fiddling and she's fiddling a bit as well. So they're not sitting totally still. So I'm still working hard at being, objectifying them and getting their likeness. But because there's movement, there's necessarily movement in the painting. So there is something, and also you haven't got hours like you might have if you were using a photo.
Yeah.
So you have to be economical with your marks. You have to
It's a real
be
skill,
straight to
isn't
the
it?
point. But yeah, you do. But mainly I'll paint from a photo, and I've had a few commissions to paint deceased loved ones,
Right.
and then everything I've just said about not not sugarcoating things, that becomes more difficult. You want to do justice because it might be people I've not met before and obviously will have no hope of meeting. So you want to do justice. You don't want to be insulting to and do like deep exaggerated wrinkles on someone's loved one.
Yeah.
You have to be honest, but because I still, whatever, I still don't like the idea of not being truthful or pandering to an idea of prettifying somebody, but it is important not to,
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what I mean? You've got to
Too
be
brutal.
somehow tactful without not being honest,
Yes.
not
Yeah.
being dishonest.
No, I think that's really interesting. So, portrait and landscape artist of the year. I'll get to that. So you've been on both.
Yes.
So you did the portrait landscape of the Sky portrait landscape artist of the year. You did the portrait one first. So is that at that time were you doing more portraits, or do you realise you were a landscape painter, or was it just you thought I'll do both because I'm good at both?
Um, Actually, the portrait one was a year or two before. At the time I applied for the portrait one, the landscape one didn't exist.
Right.
So
Okay.
I did the portrait one and got into it. I applied for all, what a really good piece of advice I was given when I was studying was to apply for everything because if you're lucky, you can expect to be successful. And by successful, I don't mean win, but get anywhere
Yeah.
with 10% of what you apply for. Don't expect more than that. And that's a high thing to aim for. So I just applied for everything, all competitions, and got somewhere with the Sky Arts portrait. And it was only ever going to be a one-off, really. I just wanted to try it and experience it. But then the landscape one came up. They introduced the landscape one. So I thought, oh, well, I am a landscape painter. I feel like I should do that. So that's kind of why I didn't. At the time I applied for the portrait one, it was just simply because the landscape one didn't exist.
And did you ever think about the fact that wanted to be known as a portrait artist or a landscape? Didn't cross you? You just wanted to experience it and see what it was
Yeah,
like. And
experience. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about what other people,
yeah.
how other people would think of me, actually. It was more just experiencing it, doing something different.
And how was it? And did anything come from it? Say the portrait one first. Did anything come from that? Did you get
Yeah,
any?
it was fun. It was really different. I hadn't really painted in front of people before. I hadn't had a time limit before. I mean, I kind of had because my son had only just been born then, so time limits
Yeah.
started coming in anyway, which was really, really good for my painting. It was quite a pivotal point, actually. But a strict time limit like that hadn't come in before. You're more well, I feel like I'm more vulnerable when I'm painting portraits because I need to get the likeness. Landscape, there's more room for error with a landscape, I think.
Yeah.
So to be on view and not totally sure of myself, that was new. And just I've never been on a film set or anything like that before. I've never been filmed. and that was really interesting. Different world, really,
Yeah.
really.
How
It's
old
a
were
new
you when you
experience.
did that?
I think 26 or
Mm.
27, but my son was something like 5 weeks old,
Right. Oh gosh.
very little. So there were struggles with that as well because I was breastfeeding, and to be, I mean, you can't, we were told you can't just, if you need the loo or something, you wait where you are in view of the camera and wait till somebody comes round. So I had to, like, my parents were looking after him. I'd had to work out new ways of feeding him or allowing them to feed him. But in the meantime, you know, your body tells you you want to feed your baby, and I was stuck
Yeah.
painting on set, unable to move. So there were all these interesting challenges to
Wow. So did you
overcome.
have to stay for the 4 hours of the time limit?
Yeah, it's not, it's spread over the whole day. So the 4 hours of painting time were quite strict, but that was spread and there was lunch in between.
Right.
So there were, it wasn't like I was stuck there for 4 hours, but
Yeah. Wow. And so then you applied for the landscape one and got onto that as well.
yeah.
And how did that compare?
Oh, it's very similar. I think, yeah, it was very similar. It wasn't a subject I would have chosen, which was made it not just difficult, but not as enjoyable, I guess. This, I didn't really like the subject matter.
It was a
But
stately home, was it?
yeah,
Yeah.
but then that's a challenge, which is always good. So it was, you know, it was enjoyable.
Would you do it
Yeah,
again?
no, I don't think so. I mean, I've had the experience now, and it was for the experience. So I'm not interested in, it was nice to do well in it. I'm not really interested in winning anything or like desperate to go further with it. It was just, you know, doing something new, and that's been fulfilled now, and it was great. The other thing it's done, which I'm really grateful for, is um it did raise my profile. It, you know, it got me seen by, I noticed that I had more followers and more emails, more inquiries. I started selling more work, so it did have a really positive impact on my career,
I
you
was
know,
going to
and
ask you
sales and
about that.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
it did help. And
More
because
so
it was
than
a
the
piece.
portrait one.
Oh, no, no, I think similar. No, the portrait one had a big impact, and then I've sort of just had a steady like trickle or even growth of inquiries. And I don't think the landscape had an enormous impact on that. It was already there thanks to the
And was it
first one.
more personal contact or was it galleries or how did that work?
A bit of both, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah, a bit of both. Lots of personal things, and yeah, both.
Would you recommend people to do it?
Um, I think if you're starting off, I think it's a good thing to do because it gets you exposure. I think if you're already established and you've got the exposure you need, I don't think it's necessary unless you just want to, you know, like me, experience something different. It's a good way to get approbation, you know, from somewhere else. Competitions are always good for that because you're having this approval from someone else. Your work is getting approval from someone else.
Hmm.
And it's important to try to, I've just been talking to people about professional practice and like what to put on your CV right at the beginning. And it is difficult to, because galleries will look at your CV. It's difficult to start with nothing. So the best way around that is to go for competitions and things.
Right.
So yeah,
Yes, you
it's
definitely
all good
recommend
experience.
applying for opens and
Oh
uh,
yeah, definitely, absolutely. I mean, I still do that now. I still apply for things now.
I was going to ask
Um,
you that. Yeah. I like
yeah,
that.
always I try and it's if I realize I haven't because I've been busy with exhibitions and things, I should, you know, I try and rectify that. It's good
Even
to
though you've had a lot of solo exhibitions, haven't you, as well as group
yeah.
exhibitions. I was looking at your CV and it's quite impressive. Are you represented by a lot of galleries? Or how does it?
I've got a few that I show with that have been really great, and you know I'll stick with and be loyal because they've treated me really well. I don't keep adding them because then you're spread too thinly.
Hmm.
Um, and it's important to make sure they're not too geographically close to each other as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And are they all over the country? Do you travel to take your paintings
I
to
don't try,
Scotland or something?
I have been to all of them in the past, but I tend to just use a courier to get them there. You know, I show work in the biscuit factory in Newcastle, and that is so far away from me. It's really impractical to go there to deliver the
Yeah.
work. So I just use a courier. Um, and I've got one in Kent as well. And again, that's so far away. I tried to go there a while ago, and the car broke down on the way there. So I I tend to courier things.
Right. And who do you use to courier? Have you
Oh, there's a
got?
really good company called Aardvark.
Oh yeah,
Aardvark Art Couriers, they're good.
yeah,
Small things I just pack to withstand the apocalypse and make sure they're tracked very
yeah.
carefully. And that's always been fine.
Oh, that's interesting. So is Newcastle the furthest north? Are you in Scotland at all?
I teach in Scotland. I have had a gallery in Scotland, but I wasn't there for that long. It's nice. So I have these sort of galleries that I've been with a long time, and then every so often things pop up. I'll have a temporary show somewhere, or I'll show work with somewhere for just a year or something. And I like that to keep it changing a little bit. And this the other reason that competitions are important because you get your work somewhere different without committing long term to a gallery that would sort of thin my output a bit.
And are there certain competitions that you would apply for that, for the kudos, would you like the RA or something like that? Is there anything that you would?
I've not applied for that. I tend to sort of instinctively, maybe perversely, just shrink away from things that are really well known that everyone's concerned about applying for.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. I would apply for it. I just haven't really. I don't know. I think at first I was intimidated by it, and then now I've stopped being intimidated by it, and I just think I'm probably unlikely to get in, so I'm not going to put lots of effort in, and I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe one
And
day I will.
the cost and everything as well, and it's a
Yeah,
bit of a lottery, isn't it?
there's a lot of galleries, exhibitions and competitions that are London based that the submission process is so tricky, especially if you're not in London,
Yeah.
that I just can't be bothered really. And
Yeah.
some of them can be quite cliquey as well, which seems like a shame. If you get in once, it's hard to see what the judging criteria are because the quality of the work isn't always
Mm.
fantastic. So if you do get in, you're kind of in it for life. You're sort of assured a place, and I don't like that kind of almost nepotism of them. It puts me off a bit. So I like it. My favorite competitions and things are the sort of more independent standalone ones from the rest of the country. They tend to be quite fun.
Yeah. And you've won quite a lot of awards, haven't you? And obviously got onto the Landscape Artist of the Year and things like that. So that's obviously come from entering these. What's the Ken? Do you say Doughty or?
Oh, it's a prize. There's a big open competition exhibition near me in Bideford every year, and it's a sponsored prize in that exhibition. So you may get things into the exhibition, which is always nice. But I've just been lucky enough to win that on top of getting the work in,
Yeah.
which is lovely.
Fantastic.
And the financial thing from getting, I mean, it's nice to get kudos, like you say. That's enough, really. But sometimes there's a financial prize or a materials prize, um which is also really nice, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if it's a materials one, I tend to use that as an excuse to try something new rather than just stock up. I'll treat myself to a new pigment that I've not tried before
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something.
I was going to ask you about, I mean, it's going back a bit really to your process, but in terms of your palette, do you use a lot of colours?
I think it's relatively. I've heard people say it's relatively limited. I don't really know. I don't limit myself. I've just worked out what without resorting to hundreds of different tubes of paint, what gives me the optimum or maximum reach around the color wheel. So I'll have two colors from every hue. And
Like a
that
warm and a cool or?
Yeah, although I don't think of it in terms of warm and cool, it'll just be that warm and cool seems to be a good description of colours, but I find it has a lot of problems and it's quite subjective. So it's not necessarily that, even if it ends up being that. I so I just think of them as sort of as divergent as possible from each other within the kind of physical space of the color wheel. So like a purpley blue and a greeny blue almost. So like a French ultramarine and a like a Windsor blue green shade is one that I really like. It's good, bright, intense. It's not really greeny, but it's got no red in it at all. So those two blues will cover every blue that I need, really.
Do you ever consider sort of the warm and cool in terms of when you mix them and getting the muddy colour, or you never think about anything like that?
No, I don't know if that is true.
Mhm.
Muddy color comes from um, having a hint of the opposite inside that mixture. So it doesn't matter whether it's a warm or a cool opposite. If you have an opposite or a contrasting color in the mixture, it's going to drag it towards the center of the color wheel where you have brown and black and neutrals, rather than keeping it high chroma towards the outside, which is much more difficult to do to keep it clean. So to not get the colors muddy, I'll just make sure everything is like sterile. I'll clean my brush really thoroughly and my palette knife and my palette, have a really clean space on my palette and make sure I don't contaminate it at all. I think if you mix a warm and a cool, the way I get my blues as bright as possible is to have like a, French ultramarine and winter blue green shade, say, I'll put them together. And I don't know if they can be thought of as warm and cool. I don't know, but like I said, it's a useful description. It doesn't seem to ring true for any rules for me
Yeah.
for keeping things clean. I have heard other people say that, but
And would you use a colour? Do you ever look at the number of pigments in your tube of paint? Is that something you'd consider to keep it clean?
um no, I wouldn't. No, I think I just do it. And I know that if I'm going to be putting something into, let's say I've got a blue, if I'm going to be putting a blue that has more purple tones in, and I've also got slightly turquoisey color, I know the slight green of the turquoise is going to react with the slight red of the purples, and that is what is going to bring deaden it. So I think you could have as many pigments as you want, but as long as they're all quite close together and near the outside of the color wheel, the high chroma values, they should be fine. But in practice, the fewer colors you have, as long as they're the correct colors, the brighter they stay.
Yeah, so you less mixing and
Yeah. I mean, when I mix, I end up with a bit of everything in. But
hmm.
when I need those intense chroma, high colors, I'll have to clean everything and
Right. That's
yeah.
interesting. I've never thought of that actually, because I'm a bit of a messy worker.
I'm very messy, but when it comes to, keeping your colors really bright, you can't compromise on it. You have to, even a tiny, tiny bit of like brown getting in your blues, just like a minuscule amount is gonna, if you think of like mixing using the color wheel, you can't achieve something that is on the outside of the color wheel, on the outside curve, because it's not possible to mix two pigments together to reach something that is further out on the circumference, just from like a, like a,
I've never really thought about it like that. I've never thought about the outside being like the true colour, and then I don't
yeah.
think I've ever thought about the
If you
middle even
Well,
of the
if you
colour.
think of, I mean, the middle, if you mix all colors together, you get black, right? So just outside of the middle, you've got the neutrals and the browns, and closer towards blue, you might have the bluey gray browns, and then on red, at the other side of the color wheel, you've got your reddy browns. But right on the arc, so if you think of 2 points on the color wheel, they're your two pigments straight out of the tube. If you mix them together, you're going to get something in the line drawn on the color wheel, the line in between those two. So you can't find a point on the circumference, which is the most intense, that is on a line between any two pigments. It just, that's not possible.
Right.
So you have a pretty tough job already trying to get a very intense color.
Mm.
So in order to keep it, yeah, you just have to be really strict with not
And if
contaminating.
you were to add white, would then that you desaturate it a little bit, or would you use white to
It
keep it?
depends, because white's not on the color wheel. So like, sometimes you look at color wheels in art shops or online and it has white in the middle. That's not really a true way that colors work. That's how light works.
Yeah.
So white doesn't really figure in the color wheel. When you add white, you have to think of the color wheel becoming three-dimensional, and you're like, so the more layers you have of it with the addition of white. So instead of black in the middle of the color wheel, if you go up a layer, you've got gray, a very neutral gray in the middle of the color wheel. So by adding white, it does different things. If you add white to blue, it really makes it zing. If you add it to a lot of your greens, they go very chalky. And I haven't quite worked out why that is. They just behave differently with the addition of white. So you have to like know from experience what to do. So
And
for
like
example,
reds as well, it's very hard to get a light. It just goes pink, doesn't it? And
yeah, so I find that then you have to temper it. Maybe with greens, if you want your greens not just to get chalky, but lighter, you have to temper it with a bit of yellow sometimes.
Do you think about complementary colours, or is it just a natural? Do you use
Sometimes
those?
they are there in it. I might be drawn to a photo or a scene because of the complementary colours. I don't tend to just put them in. I don't tend to invent them.
You wouldn't
But
use them just to accentuate something, that you'd use them
not,
because they're there and that's what you see.
I think so, yeah. But you, as you're looking at the world, you might perceive colors. If a color is really, really bright, you might perceive the other, it's complementary somewhere in the shadows, in the kind of play of color and light that you get in your peripheral vision. So like if you're looking at a really bright green landscape, I feel like other things appear a bit pink just because your cones are resting or are overworking and compensating. So, I always remember when I was little, I had a froggy umbrella and it was a proper dome one. So you hold it and you're totally surrounded by green. And I remember putting it down and just everything looked pinky purple.
Right.
So I think if you're looking at very, very bright blue sky, everything else looks a little bit orangey when you look away from it. So sometimes I will not invent colors, but try to acknowledge the tricks that your eyes play on you by adding complementary colors.
And are you influenced by where you live? Your landscape is because you're painting realistically, and that's where you live. Is that mostly what you paint, or do you travel around? Or
I do travel around. I think anywhere I go, I'm looking for opportunities to paint a different landscape.
yeah,
I've done so many paintings of North Devon because it's the play of light and fresh air in the place is great. But I have and I can always find subjects to paint around here, but it's worth taking advantage of being in a different environment with a different landscapes have different sets of colors, different cities have a different feel to them. When it's really hot, the colors are different. So I will really take advantage if I go anywhere and desperately try to get something. But I found when I was living in Brighton, it was a wonderful place to be. Lots of, much more kind of cultural things going on than in North Devon, and it's close to London as well. So in some ways it was brilliant, but the landscapes just didn't grab me. I know there's plenty of countryside around in the southeast, but it didn't grab me in the same way. And I can't quite put my finger on it. Sometimes it did. There were brilliant subjects to paint there, but I feel like I can be overwhelmed with them in Devon.
yeah. And
So
do
I
you
find that
like
a bit
painting
more.
cityscapes? Do you ever do
Well,
cityscape?
it's all fair game. If you're being objective, it's all fair game. And I find that the way the light hits whatever is very democratizing. Light, if what you're painting is light, it can fall on a a majestic mountainscape, or it can fall on an alley with some skips in it. It can sort of render anything beautiful and romantic. I've painted really beautiful romantic car parks before, with having had just rain on them and then the sun's going down.
Yeah.
Sort of
So it's really the light and the colours that
yeah,
really
I think I find that really
inspire you.
exciting when you're somewhere not traditionally beautiful, but the light just changes it into an 18th century romantic German painting. It's really it's quite nice.
Yeah. So when you paint different parts of the country, how does that affect when galleries stock your work? Do they want work that's from that area, or do they mind where it's of? Does
Some
it?
do.
Hmm.
Yeah, some do. I think a lot of the galleries I show with are happy to, people travel. People that buy paintings often travel. You have to have a set, it's a it is a relatively exclusive, because they're all commercial galleries. They're interested in selling the work, so they're happy to get things that are from other countries, because a lot of the clients travel and are interested in paintings from all over the place. They're happy to get local ones as well. There are a couple that would prefer me to give them local scenes. I don't really like being dictated to with what I paint. Well, no, I don't like being dictated to with what I paint, and I think everyone understands that. I'm lucky because what I want to paint is quite sellable for now. That's just lucky. I wouldn't want to have to think about what I can market or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I wouldn't
Paint
enjoy
what
it.
you want.
So I'm lucky, and I tend to be able to get away with this by just painting what I want, and then out of what I've got available, I'll give the gallery its sort of preferred end of my work. And that has served me okay. But having said that, the gallerists that I work with are all so brilliant at what they do. They know what is going to sell. So I can't just ignore them or tell them to leave me alone.
Yeah.
So I have to, because they're like, they know what they're talking about. They work very hard and they know what's going to sell. But I think of it as giving them what I want out of my output, not changing my output though.
Yeah. And do you sell abroad? Do you have any galleries abroad?
I don't have any galleries abroad. It's quite difficult with every
Brexit. Yeah,
recent,
Brexit.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is difficult. I've had really annoying things, like when I'm painting in Germany, people ask me if they can buy a painting off me while I'm in Germany. So when I'm teaching there, and they would give me money for it right there and take the thing home with them. But I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that, because then I'm okay teaching there, but I can't. It would be illegal to, as far as I understand it, I wouldn't be allowed to sell a painting there.
Right.
And some people might just do it, but I don't. I'm the first child, and I don't like getting in trouble or doing things.
Yeah.
It's too stressful.
Yeah.
So but that's ridiculous. I feel so silly, and all of the people in Europe are like, you know they're used to being in Europe, where it's all a bit freer and easier. So it puts me in an awkward position, and it feels silly saying, yeah, I know you're looking at it right now, but if you really want it, you'll have to wait till I get home, and then you'll have to pay me, and then I'll have to post it to you.
Yeah. I remember
So
seeing something on Instagram or one of the social medias that this lady in Canada was showing her work in America at a fair, and she got to the border and they wouldn't let her let her either she had to pay taxes to
yeah.
actually just take them into the country, or it just seems absolutely ridiculous that you
Yeah,
can't do that. So yeah, it's crazy,
yeah,
isn't it?
it is. I mean, yeah, I guess there are reasons, but yeah,
Yeah.
it is awkward. The only thing I do is there's a gallery that runs the art fairs, and they will take my work. And I think, as far as I'm aware, that has nothing to do with me. They sort that out, but it means my work is seen in other countries.
Right, yeah. Have you got anything coming up?
Yeah, I've got a few things coming up this year, actually. I've got an exhibition for the opening of a nutritional cafe in Morton Hampstead. So this really nice looking foodie place that's opening, and I think it is called Hippo, as in Hippocrates,
Oh yeah.
Hippo Dartmoor, I think. Anyway,
Did I see that on your website? Did I see something about that on?
possibly. I can't remember if I've updated my website. I'm not very good at being on the ball with my website. But that, I don't know exactly when the opening's going to be. I think we're aiming for April. but I'm really looking forward to that because it's one of those, a new, different, temporary thing.
How did
And
that come about?
it was somebody who I was in an exhibition with years ago to do with kind of postpartum painting. Was so these really a really like interesting exhibition that was in North Devon. Oh, 10 years ago now, because it was straight after. She got in touch with me. That's why all these interesting exhibitions are so useful, because things crop up, a decade or more later.
Yeah.
So she remembered me from that, and she's got this big project to open this place on Dartmoor. And it was really aligned with my ethics and the way I think about food and sustainability and everything. So I just really liked the idea of being her inaugural artist. And she wants to make it, she's an artist herself, so she wants to make the cafe, very arty and interesting. And I so she'll have lots of exhibitions there. So I was kind of honored to be the first one.
Right.
I'm looking forward to that. But I've also got a sort of well, I've got art fairs that I've with Will's Art Warehouse. They run the art fairs, but also they're taking me to whichever one is coming up. I think it's in March. The affordable art fairs.
Yeah.
So there's
And do you
that.
actually go to those? Do you go on the
No,
stand, and you just
no.
they just take your work
I
and
would if I was there, if I was closer.
yeah,
I have been to them in the past, but I'm not planning on. I don't like sort of make a habit of going.
yeah,
Um, I've got there's a gallery I show with on the Scilly Isles, really lovely gallery, Tamarisk, and I've had solo shows with them before, but it's a sort of mini solo. I'm their featured artist for a little while
yeah.
in July, I think. So I'm going to make some work for them, and then I should be having a solo show in November in Sevenoaks with Claremont. So I've got actually quite a busy year. Things have all stacked up. Oh, it's just one more. There's a really nice little residency in Cornwall. It's part of a gallery I permanently show work with, but they take over this lovely little fisherman's shelter in Port Scatho. So that's in September. So I will be there for a weekend in September. I think it's the 20th that weekend, making work, and I'll have my paintings up and I'll be making more paintings.
And
And
which gallery is that through?
that's with the Harbour Gallery in Port
Harbour
Scatho.
Gallery.
But
Right.
that's nice because it's a temporary thing, and I kind of actually talk to people then because I'm there. So
Have they got something to do with is it contemporary British painting?
yeah, it's sort of that they're connected. It's sort of their sister thing.
Right.
It's British contemporary art, I think, is the
That's it, yeah.
it's online. Yeah.
Right. I didn't actually ask you about your studio and if it's at home or if it's outside, if you have a separate.
Yeah, it's at home. I like painting at home. I've had studios. Everything suits different people, doesn't it? Different strokes for different folks. So I don't, I mean, some people like to go out for the day as if it's work and
Yeah.
spend all their time, spend hours there and then um come home for the day. I really like to have it to be able to work whenever I want and to have it accessible all the time, to be able to pop up and look at things. So it's part of life. So I like having my studio at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky because I've got this attic space that I can work in. I can lock the door, keep everyone away from me.
Yeah. Do you ever
My
do open studios or anything like that?
No, I have done, but it's not really I mean, I couldn't do it here. It's
Yeah.
really you are seeing the very best, neatest angle, obviously. It's a mess. And it's not, I mean, it's through my house and up some very steep stairs. I wouldn't be able to practically do to have people here. And I also wouldn't be able to commit the time to just sitting somewhere and
Yeah.
invigilate the whole time. So I
Yeah.
don't tend to. I haven't found that they're fantastically profitable either. They can be quite nice for chatting, but when you're in a little village in the middle of nowhere, well,
Yeah.
I'm not in the middle of nowhere actually, but it's not in the middle of town, so it wouldn't be that well attended, and I haven't found them to be fantastic for selling. So
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. So I think we've covered everything. I always finish off with, have you got any advice for any budding artists? But is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we
um,
approach that?
I guess I speak to quite a lot of people who um I think if you're going to do it, you have to like accept the way of life almost. If you're if you've got a certain standard of living that you really expect to be kept in, you know, maybe painting isn't for you, or be prepared to do things you don't really want to do to follow the money, which is fine, you know, as long as you're honest about it and authentic. If you could still be really enjoying what you're making, but it's just more to a brief or more to do with sort of production. So that's a great life, doing making things that you're enjoying is fine. But if you want to be authentic and follow kind of your development and your, you know, be creative, you may need, you're probably going to have to accept, as long as you can survive and, you know, hopefully be warm and fed, that's kind of enough, and anything else is a bonus. And I think you have to accept that. But I think other people's acceptance and praise is nice, and that's why it's good to go for competitions and exhibitions. But I've realized recently that actually the most rewarding thing, you have to like listen to teachers and other professionals, you have to listen to what people say. But recently I've realized that everyone has their own opinions, and it's when you're truly proud of something you've done that it feels like you are on the right track. Which is, you know, you can set high standards for yourself, but it's nice to know that you're like the important person. So
Yeah, so it's just being authentic and doing what
I
you
think so.
love.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, being authentic and being true to yourself and prioritizing. So if authenticity is the most important, then money can't be. If
Right,
money is the
okay.
most important, then just accept and be honest that creative kind of integrity, maybe that's a bit harsh, but the creative purity can't be the
Oh, you might be
priority.
lucky and get both.
Yeah, you may be lucky, but that's, you know, that's less. I
Do you
mean,
think
I've been
you've
lucky
got both?
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the moment, but I know that it could change, you know. I might decide I want to do something different and that wouldn't earn any money.
Yeah.
Or taste might change or markets might change and I'll be stuck doing these still, but people will be after.
Does it stop you from evolving a little bit because you know that certain things sell, or would you never consider that?
I really try not to. I try and be aware and see if I'm being sort of subconsciously swayed towards these, but I really try not to. I try to
Yeah.
follow
Yeah.
what I want to do.
Yeah. That's great.
Mm.
Right. Well, I think that's probably it then. Well, that's been absolutely fascinating. It's been brilliant because I think I've learned a lot from that. So it's been
I
really
think
nice talking to you.
talking to people about what you make is really useful because it makes you question yourself and sort of justify why you're doing things, and some and you know, just ruminating on stuff can give you ideas for new things. So
Yeah,
it's really valuable
absolutely.
for me.
Oh, well, thanks ever so much. I really, really appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed
Really nice to
talking
meet
to
you.
you.
And
Yeah.
have a look at your studio as well. You've got a beautiful space to work
It's
in.
very messy at the moment.
Oh.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for another fascinating glimpse into the life of an artist. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, or share. It really helps get the word out and grow the community. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. See you next time.